I should have known something was wrong when they poured 2 glasses instead of 3. We were out on the lake, clear, still cold. Travis steered the small pontoon with one hand, the other casually resting on Lena's shoulder. My daughter, dressed in white like it was a wedding. Not my birthday, smiled too hard for someone who hadn't called me in weeks. "This is peaceful, huh, Mom?" she said, handing me a glass of champagne. I nodded, but didn't sip. They had brought no cake, no candles, not even a card. Just a folded blanket, a cooler with 2 bottles, and a manila folder tucked between the seats. I didn't ask what was in it. Lena leaned in her eyes on the water. "We thought this would be a special way to celebrate you, just the 3 of us. Out here. No noise, no distractions." I smiled politely. My joints ached from the breeze and I wished I'd brought my heavier coat. But I didn't complain. I never do. Then Travis turned off the engine. The boat rocked gently, the silence eerie. A gull cried somewhere overhead. Lena touched my wrist. "Mom, just sign a few things while you're still clear-headed. That way we don't have to go through courts when the time comes." I turned to her. "What things?" "The deed, power of attorney." "The usual stuff," she said, as if listing groceries. I didn't speak, just stared at the folder as Travis slowly stood behind me. Lena's voice softened. "Happy birthday, Mom." That was the last thing I heard before the shove came fast, hard, no warning. The water hit me like a slap. Cold, deep, endless. I gasped, but the lake swallowed the sound. My arms flailed, legs kicked instinctively. I came up once, just enough to see their faces at the edge of the boat. They didn't scream. They didn't throw a rope. They just watched. And then they turned away. I went under again, lungs burning, clothes heavy. But I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. The first rule they taught us in river training was simple: don't panic. The water will always win if you give it fear. So I didn't scream. I didn't flail. I turned my body, kicked my legs, and aimed for the far bank. The cold was brutal, sharp as glass, biting into every joint, but it kept me awake, focused. Travis had cut the motor. That meant we were drifting. I counted breaths. Counted strokes, used the moonlight to track the distant outline of the western tree line. I knew these waters better than they did. They thought the current would do their job for them. But they forgot. I used to guide rescues on this lake. I knew where the snags were, where the banks dipped low enough to climb out. My arms burned. My side throbbed, likely from the impact against the railing. Once I slipped under for too long and surfaced, choking eyes, stinging with lake water and shame. But I kept moving. 2 hours passed, maybe more. The boat was long gone. My fingers went numb. I stopped feeling my legs. But I kept going. I had to. When I finally touched mud beneath me, I nearly cried. I crawled, coughing onto the bank, knees scraping gravel, palms sinking into damp moss. The world spun. I tasted blood in the back of my throat. No headlights, no voices. No one was looking. They hadn't called for help. That was the real wound. I laid there a long time, curled in soaked clothes, heart pounding through my ribs. Then I got up. My boots had been pulled off by the current. I walked barefoot, every step raw skin peeled from my heel to toe. My coat dragged like a soaked towel. My teeth wouldn't stop chattering. But I kept walking. Past the logging turnoff, past the trailhead, until I saw the roofline of the old ranger station closed down years ago, but still standing. Still mine. The lock was rusted, but the key I hid behind the loose stone was still there. I didn't cry when I stepped inside. I closed the door and slid to the floor, shaking. I waited until the second morning to go back. The bruises along my ribs had darkened the gash on my thigh, crusted over with grit. I wrapped it with gauze from the ranger station's old medkit, the tape yellowed but still holding. My body ached with every step, but the fire in my chest burned hotter. The walk to the cabin took longer than it used to. I kept off the main road. No one could know I was back. Not yet. When I reached the clearing, I stopped. My cabin door was shut, but slightly crooked on its hinges. The lock had been snapped clean. I stood there staring at it before stepping up the creaking steps. Inside, the silence was too neat, too still. A cushion from the couch had been tossed aside. The drawers in my desk were open empty, papers scattered, cabinets ajar. I moved slowly, stepping over the mess into the bedroom. The safe, the one tucked beneath the floorboard under my bed, had been pulled up wide open, empty. I sat on the edge of the mattress and breathed slow and sharp, staring at the stain on the floor where the mud from their shoes had dried. They hadn't just come looking for me. They'd come knowing I wouldn't be there. I walked to the kitchen and opened the drawer where I kept the old battery radio. Static hissed to life. I tuned slowly through the bands until I landed on the local news station. Merelda Vance, 69, presumed missing after an apparent accident on the lake. I turned it off. They didn't search. They didn't file a report out of grief. They'd already moved forward, cleaning up, removing obstacles, taking what they thought was theirs. I leaned on the counter, both hands braced against the worn wood, breathing through the weight that pressed against my spine. I didn't know what else they had, but I knew what they wanted, and I knew they believed I was gone for good. They had no idea what still existed, or what I'd never trusted them with. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark with a towel wrapped around my shoulders, watching the embers in the wood stove die one by one. In the silence, memories moved louder than any sound. I was 32 when Ray died. A logging accident. They told me he was crushed instantly, like that was some mercy. Lena was 6. She asked me if Daddy had gone into the river. I said no. She cried anyway. I went back to work a week later. My parents offered to help, but I told them no. I didn't want Lena to grow up watching people pity her. So I became everything: mother, father, provider, nurse, teacher. I guided river tours during the day and stitched gear repairs by candlelight at night. When Lena got into college, I sold my wedding band to pay for her first semester. I never told her. I just said it didn't fit anymore. She wanted to study finance. I was proud of her. When Travis came into the picture, I was skeptical. Something about the way he shook my hand, too firm, too performative. But he smiled the way Ray used to, and Lena loved him. That was enough. They wanted to buy a place just outside Boulder. I put in $10,000. Just until we closed the loan, they said. I never asked for it back. Years passed. They climbed ladders. I stayed here in the cabin Ray and I built with our bare hands. The walls still held our laughter. The floor still creaked where he used to step. I had the papers drawn up when I turned 65. I planned to give the cabin to Lena when I was gone. I even wrote her a letter to go with the deed tucked in the safe with the will. I wanted her to feel trusted, chosen. Now the safe was empty. The letter gone. My future gift taken like some overdue payment. They didn't even let me die first. But what they didn't know was that what they found wasn't everything. And what they didn't find was still mine. They thought they were clever, lifting what was in the safe filing forms moving fast. But clever isn't the same as careful. I never trusted Travis with paperwork. And I stopped trusting Lena the day she told me years ago that wills just make everything messy. That was when I made sure the real things, the ones that mattered, were stored where they'd never think to look. By mid-morning, I was on the road. I took the old truck. Windows stuck brakes soft, but it got me where I needed to go, 2 counties east, a bank branch so small it didn't even have a digital sign. The manager had changed, but the box was still there. Miss Eleanor Ray, the clerk, asked, tilting his head. I nodded. That's me. My middle name and my maiden name. No one but the county clerk and my late husband ever knew I registered under it. Not Lena. not anyone. He led me into the vault. I turned the key. Inside the narrow box was a sealed manila envelope heavier than I remembered. I took it, sat at the tiny metal table, and opened it with steady hands. The original deed to the cabin signed and notarized with my name, and my name only. A copy of the revised will filed 2 years ago, and a small USB drive with a green sticker on it, my recording from last winter when I updated everything. I'd sat in this same chair speaking into my phone. If you're seeing this, I'm likely gone, but not before making sure my name stays where it belongs. I hadn't planned on being alive to need it, but now the envelope wasn't a safeguard. It was a weapon. I packed everything into my coat, walked out past the clerk without a word. Outside, the wind had shifted. I stood on the sidewalk a long time watching the branches sway. They thought they'd taken it all, but all they stole was the decoy. And now I held the real thing in my pocket and their entire plan in the palm of my hand. By the time I returned to the ranger station, they'd already buried me online. Lena's post had over 100 comments. A photo of me from 2 years ago standing in front of the cabin with a pie I hadn't baked. The caption read, "We lost our sweet mother to the river yesterday. It was sudden. We're devastated. Please keep us in your prayers." Travis had shared it with a longer note. The boat rocked. She must have slipped. I dove in, but the current was too strong. There was even a photo of the lake over-filtered with a black ribbon in the corner. I scrolled through the comments. "So sorry for your loss. She was a light in this world. Let us know where to send flowers." Grief as currency. Sympathy as cover. What they didn't know was that my phone, clunky, old but waterproof, had stayed in my coat pocket. I remembered pressing the side button out of habit. I always recorded my river safety walkthroughs, especially when training guides. I hadn't stopped it. I unlocked the phone and opened the voice memos folder. There it was, 42 minutes long. I pressed play. Static, wind, idle chatter. Then Lena's voice. "Just be calm. Don't push too fast. Make it look like a fall. Travis, you're the one who said today was the window. We miss it, we lose the title." Lena, again quieter. "Just say it was her idea. She always wanted to die out here anyway." Then came the clink of the glass, the hollow thud of movement. My own voice. "What is this for?" And then the sound that stopped my breath. A shove. A splash. Silence. Their plan clear as day, recorded in their own words. I set the phone down, hands trembling, not from fear, but from rage, sharpened by clarity. They hadn't just wanted me gone. They needed me gone. I copied the file to the USB and slipped both into the envelope. The memorial was scheduled for Sunday at the town church, and I planned to attend. The church was already half full when I stepped onto the gravel path. They had gone all out, white lilies by the entrance, candles lit in the windows, a printed program with my face on the cover and the words, "In loving memory of Merelda Vance," written in cursive script I would never have chosen. Through the open doors I could hear Travis speaking. "She was strong," he said, pausing like he needed to swallow emotion. "She loved this land, this lake. If there's any comfort in losing her, it's knowing she went the way she might have wanted, surrounded by the water she loved." Lena stood beside the altar in black, clutching a folded handkerchief, her head bowed like the grieving daughter she'd practiced being. I waited until the last guest had taken their seat. Then I pushed the doors open. They creaked just enough to make the room turn. The organist stopped. A whisper passed through the crowd like wind through grass. Travis froze mid-sentence. Lena's eyes snapped upward and locked on mine. I walked slowly, steadily down the center aisle. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Every step I took chipped away at their performance. Some people stood, others shrank back. At the front of the church was a framed photo of me, younger and smiling. There was a candle next to it, flickering softly, and beneath the frame an empty space waiting for ashes that didn't exist. I stepped forward, reached into my coat, and placed the envelope down on the table. It was thick. Inside the real deed, the forged documents, a copy of my will, and a USB containing the recording. On top of it all, in my handwriting, one sentence: "See you in court." I turned and walked out without looking back. Behind me, the church erupted, not in song, but in gasps and murmurs, and the cracking sound of a fantasy falling apart. The sun outside was warm on my skin. For the first time in days, I didn't feel cold. And I knew exactly where I was going next. The sheriff's office still smelled like old coffee and pine cleaner. I walked in without an appointment envelope clutched tight in my hand. Deputy Kearns looked up from his desk, blinked twice, and stood. "Miss Vance?" he said, like he wasn't sure if I was real. "I need to speak with Sheriff Lubbock," I said. He disappeared into the back, and less than a minute later, the sheriff himself stepped out. His eyes widened the moment he saw me. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered. "We've got a missing persons report on you. Then you'll want to hear the rest." He led me into his office and shut the door. I laid the envelope on his desk and began unpacking it page by page. The deed. My original will. A notarized letter confirming my ownership. A copy of the forged documents Lena had filed. And finally, the USB drive. He plugged it in, sat back, listened. When the splash echoed through the small speakers and Travis's voice stammered in panic, Lubbock rubbed his face with both hands. "You're saying they pushed you," he said slowly, "and while you were presumed dead, they transferred your property using forged documents." I nodded. He stared at me silent for a long moment, then leaned back in his chair. "We're not talking about a family dispute anymore. This isn't a will argument or a land squabble. This is attempted murder, Merelda. Fraud. Conspiracy." I figured as much, I said. He exhaled. "We'll need to open a full investigation. I'll have to send this over to the DA. Do it quietly." His eyebrows rose. "You don't want them picked up right away?" "Not yet. Let them think they still have time." He studied me again, but didn't argue. "All right." I stood and shook his hand. "Sheriff," I said at the door, "just make sure no one erases me on paper before the law catches up in person." Outside, the clouds were moving in. It was time to let the truth rise just like I had. They arrived in dark suits, like they were still performing grief. Lena clutched a tissue before even sitting down. Travis wore the same solemn face he used in the Facebook post. But under the courtroom lights, there was a crack in their polish, small but growing. I sat quietly in the back next to the deputy who'd escorted me in. I didn't need to be front and center. My name was already on every page in the judge's file. Their lawyer opened with a shaky explanation. This was a family misunderstanding. A tragic miscommunication. Our clients believed Mrs. Vance had passed and acted under emotional distress. The judge didn't blink. When the prosecutor stood, he went straight to the recording. There was no need to dramatize it. He simply played it. Lena's voice. Travis's agreement. The clink of glass. The silence after the splash. It filled the courtroom like a fog, thick, inescapable. I watched Lena press the tissue harder into her face, trying to hide behind it. Travis shifted in his seat. The gallery behind me didn't move. Not a single cough. Not even a whisper. Then came the forged documents. Side-by-side comparisons. My real signature and the one on the transfer forms. A handwriting expert confirmed what I already knew: the paper was a lie. Their lawyer tried once more. Intent can be complicated in grief. The judge finally looked up slow and deliberate, her glasses sliding to the tip of her nose. "Grief does not produce signatures," she said. "Nor does it produce financial transfers, coordinated paperwork, or the kind of language we just heard in that recording. No one laughed. This wasn't theater anymore. The court recessed for the day. The DA requested charges to move forward: fraud, conspiracy, attempted murder. The judge didn't object. I never took the stand. I didn't need to. My voice had already been heard in the only moment that mattered: the push, the plan, the lie. They had told the world I was gone, but now the truth stood taller than any eulogy they ever gave. And tomorrow, I'd go home. The mornings are quiet again. I sit on the porch with a cup of black coffee and a view of the lake they thought would keep me. The trees are beginning to turn their edges touched with amber. It's the same view Ray and I shared for years, the one Lena used to run toward barefoot in the summer. Before it all changed. The cabin is mine again, legally and fully. It always was. But now, no one questions it. No one dares. Lena and Travis are both awaiting trial. Their lawyer filed for delay some nonsense about mental distress, but the court isn't playing along anymore. Their story collapsed the minute the judge heard the word window in that recording. And no amount of tears can unforge a signature. I haven't seen them since the hearing. I don't plan to. What I did plan, finally, fully, was what came next. The deed still bears my name, but last week I transferred the title into something new: River Daughters Foundation. I filed the paperwork myself, using the same pen I'd used to write Lena's first tuition check. The foundation will offer wilderness training land, rights, education, and shelter for girls who've been told they're small. Girls who've been pushed aside, cut off, talked over. I've met 3 of them already. One of them cried when I taught her how to use a compass. She said no one had ever trusted her to find her way before. That's the gift now. Not the cabin. Not the win. Not even the survival. It's the knowing that even when they tried to erase me, I left behind something they couldn't undo. A path for someone else. I sipped the last of my coffee. It's gone cold, but I don't mind. Inside, the envelope still sits in my desk drawer. Not the old one with the documents and the recording. That's with the sheriff now. This one holds only one thing: a photo. Me. On the porch. Smiling. I wrote one word on the back: returned.